Warning, this video is intended for adult collectors. It contains plastic collectibles, questionable opinions, and the guy that won't leave Scott McNeil alone. You have been warned. This is Random Review.
Before we begin, thank you very much to JB Spino for joining the Patreon campaign. I recognize that name. Thank you very much for coming back. Always appreciate a return fan. Appreciate everyone who pitches in there, because as always, yes, it does keep the channel alive. I'm not hyperbolizing. And you guys apparently aren't kidding around by not letting me get back to my normal intro. Once again, I have a backlog of shout-outs. I do appreciate all of them. Some of you wanted to go a year, still short of that, but you know what? At this point, it just might happen. I'm not even making bets anymore. So, I'll tell you guys right now, I might be in for a long run of reviews here on this channel to close out the year because I've got so much on the way. My United is already on the way, even though that was supposed to come out in a month or two. And my Deathsaurus, as of this recording, got left on my doorstep while I was at work. So it's going to be a long period of reviews, because I know I've been very thin on them. But we're going to get to a whole bunch of new stuff that I'm kind of excited to talk about. But to kind of ease us back into it, let's talk about Code Red. Yes, this is it. This is the newest Transformers collaborative figure, combining with Stranger Things. And now, full disclosure, I don't watch Stranger Things because it's on a channel I didn't get, and frankly, terrestrial TV doesn't really interest me anymore. So yeah, I haven't really watched or kept up. I only vaguely know of it. So I bought this because I was able to put is part of Target's like 25% off sale on Transformers the other week, and I figured everyone has been going nuts over it. Someone even told me, hey, they finally figured out how to do Ironhide, except it's not Ironhide. So now I'm really curious about how well this toy came out. And I figured since I am not a fan of the show, I'm not going to come in with any type of bias toward it. So you're going to get something of a more genuine opinion of just how the toy is. So, for starters, we have the authentic Volkswagen bus, which is the Surfer Boy pizza vehicle of choice. It is fully licensed, so this is an accurate vehicle, right down to having little Volkswagen insignias on the front and the back of the vehicle. Looking at comparison shots on Google, it's pretty close to how it looks, in real life. I think the proportions of this are just a little bit different. It's just a little bit off, I think. But it's close enough. Still looks good. Still looks like the correct vehicle. Tampograph-wise, they actually did a pretty good job of trying to get all of the little indications of the brand on the vehicle. So, for starters, the Volkswagen emblem in the front, done well. We have the grille and the headlights and the turn signals all painted, which is actually pretty rare. They include all the details. Surfer Boy Pizza on the front with translucent windows, complete with painted windshield wipers, painted rear view windows, or rear view mirrors rather, and then more emblems on the side, more logos, delivered hot to your door. Turn signal indicator again, bumper painted again, rear vent there, the window also painted. Rear window painted too. They skipped the translucent plastic in this step. And then here at the rear, this is where you can see a lot of the missing stuff. So a lot of the advertisement on the back of the windshield isn't there. There's another line of text that's gone as well. I think just because this area is so broken up, it wouldn't have been practical to tampograph the whole thing on for something that was probably going to look pretty ugly with all the cracks in it. You do have the Volkswagen name and emblems on there. So at least you have that. And again, turn signals painted, rear window painted, lots of paint on the vehicle mode. The only detail of note that they skipped was the phone number that should be right there, which may be just as well you don't have a bunch of kids calling the phone number on the side of the vehicle. So I guess that's going to be it. And then we we take a look. The Surfer Boy pizza sign on the top, done pretty well. This, again, accurate to how it looks in the show with the silver border and the silver all the way through. It's flat gray here, but, you know, you get the idea. A little bit ugly on this side with the exposed screws, but hey, what are you going to do? So, overall, pretty decent facsimile of the actual vehicle. This kind of like creamy yellow, it's very much an 80s color. This is also accurate to the show. Admittedly, my camera, because of the lights, are picking up a lot of the green that is coming through because of the translucent blue that got painted over. It's not a bad paint match. It's kind of close, but in my light, I can see the difference. But it's okay for what it is. I've seen much worse jobs. I think the only glaring cosmetic thing about this vehicle mode is the fact that, one, it's been out of focus a little bit too much, I apologize, but also that hinge at the top that is not done in the same cream yellow color. So I presume that's unpaintable plastic that was just part of that sprue, but you know, that's just a guess. But beyond that, yeah, it's not a bad job at facsimilating the van. Now, there are accessories to this figure that we can actually use. For starters, this does become a weapon, so we can undo this and actually weaponize it in the vehicle mode. I'm going to save that for the robot mode, though. For now, I'll just show you how the weapons store, which is little tabs on the sides of the weapons, plug into the slots that are molded into the hinges. So rather than have a big gap somewhere in the vehicle, they're just using like the stuff that's already imperfect about the appearance of the vehicle to store the weapons on the side. I was going to say hide, but there's no hiding here. Battle axe on the side of my Surfer Boy pizza van. There is also a way of mounting this tiny little pizza box accessory. So this is just kind of a fun little inclusion. The tampograph on it's actually pretty clear, even though it's very tiny. And honestly, it's not going to do a whole lot. So for this mode, you have to plug it onto the side of this mace weapon, which we can do. It gets a little bit heavy for the tab, but it will hold together eventually. And that's pretty much what you can do with it. So it's a little bit weird. It's at least better than it just being guns pointed off the top of the vehicle. I still hate how that looks. So let's get the weaponry off, and we can go ahead and transform this into the robot mode, and we'll see what we're getting into there. So I'm going to go ahead and disengage the sign, put that aside. This starts kind of familiar. Someone said that it's finally doing Ironhide correct. Well, it kind of works the same way as Siege and Earthrise Ironhide, and that first step is to unclip these big panels and fold them all the way to the back. And similar to that Ironhide, half the time I do that, the panels pop off of their hinges. So, yeah, I understand why this guy was conveniently mistaken for Ironhide. Folding up those big sections of translucent plastic, I'm going to go ahead and start cracking the back open. Fold this whole section down so the legs are nice and clear. Rotate around. And now the legs have to do a whole bunch of unfolding and collapsing. For starters, the feet are stored in the rear, which unfold like so. Really good way of dealing with that extra bulk, by the way. Instead of just the feet just hanging off the back, Ironhide. You'll see why I'm getting mad at him for a second here. You'll figure it out. He'll figure it out. All right, we'll do the same thing on this side. Go ahead and unflip like so. That also creates your ankle tilt, which is great. Close that up to close that gap. That's pretty much the lower half. So let's go to the upper half now. All right, and that's going to unpeg from the top section here. Unhinge like that. Now, the torso here has like an actual like collapse point. So it doesn't, so it actually, creates something of like a more natural paunch. And these tabs here have to fall into these tabs here. At the same time, these tabs have to fall into those slots there. So you got 4 tabs that all have to line up in order to get this vehicle into robot mode. And it is a little bit tricky to get all of this coordinated. It's all kind of got to go in at the same time. So let me... Come on, please cooperate with me. It's not completely engaged. There we go. There we go. All 4 tabs in. That's about the only really tricky part. Otherwise, transformation does have a few clever tricks, but actually it's kind of simple in its execution. Yeah, I also did, yeah, I also needed to get this panel up, but it doesn't really tab in once it's there, so just that's fine. Wrists are ball jointed, so they just flip out like so. Like that, and there we go. That is going to be the transformation for Code Red, and yeah, it's, well, it does have some things that vaguely remind me of some of the recent Ironhide toys, especially how it deals with the panels of the van mode, but for the rest of it, it's actually kind of clean. There's nothing like overly complex about how it transforms, and it's just done in a very efficient way, which when people say, yeah, it feels like they kind of figured out how to do Ironhide a little bit too late, that is kind of what it feels like. Beyond that, though, we do have some things to talk about. For starters, deco-wise, we have exposed a lot more of the grays, which does give us that more traditional Transformers vibe. The head itself, done up interestingly, you do have this interesting head sculpt with a headpiece, like he's ready to take a delivery order at any moment. It's all silver, which is weird because it's the only thing that's actually like all silver in this robot mode outside of the rear view window or mirrors. And yeah, it's done with some translucent plastic in the eyes as well, so it's got kind of a visor, kind of sunglass look, which isn't too bad. No light piping. If that was what they were going for, they painted over it, which is fine. We here at the TJOmega YouTube channel aren't the biggest fan of light piping, but I know some people like it. He can't do it. Beyond that, yeah, we're looking at a lot of the details from the vehicle mode that have carried over. I do like how the windows have become part of the leg paint. Gives it a little bit more color down below the waist, which is very necessary, because otherwise, honestly, this cream yellow and just flat gray combination honestly isn't doing a whole lot for me. This is one of those situations where I think I really would have preferred if those inner robot parts, instead of being gray, had some other color going on, because I feel like he just kind of comes across as a little drab. And even with a unique detail like the headpiece, the head sculpt is also not terribly remarkable. So he comes across kind of generic. I feel like if I was playing like a Transformers video game, this would be a generic enemy that I would be fighting if I was playing the Decepticon campaign. He just kind of has that vibe of, you know, back of the crowd kind of Autobot. You know, it doesn't hit the same, like, really super cool notes that, you know, like Gigawatt hit, for instance. You know, and those were based on previous molds. This is completely fresh. Now, I will give it credit. It's clean. It's got 2 little panels left over from the vehicle mode, but considering Ironhides have had to create these plastic lasagnas of panels in their legs in order to form up the robot mode, and or create some kind of gigantic shield from the bulk of his vehicle they couldn't adapt into the vehicle, or into the robot rather, then yeah, like he actually comes across a lot neater than a lot of the Ironhides that I have seen. That said, it still looks just a wee bit plain to me. So let's go into the articulation rundown. He's actually pretty good here, as you would expect. Ball jointed head means left and right all the way, as well as some up and down tilt. You've got universal shoulders that are done very nicely. Bicep rotation 360. Elbows a little bit beyond the 90. And the wrists are actually ball jointed. So aside from having full rotation, you have a little bit of inward tilt if you can figure out something to do with that. Waist-wise, yeah, he does have a waist joint, but the back kibble does interfere with it a little bit once it hits the hips. So not a whole lot of range unless you start forcing parts past each other, or undoing transformation tabs in this case. Full universal hips, working very nice. Thighs, they do rotate quite a bit. Get all the rotation you need there. 90-degree knees, but there is a detent to them. So they will hold in that position, and they will hold in this position, and they really want to be in either or. They will hold in between, but they really don't like being there. And then you do have a really nice ankle tilt as well, with very flat feet. They'll keep him posed in various positions. So articulation abounds on this guy. So there's a few weak spots, but overall, it's just about all the poseability you would expect out of this figure. Before we get into the accessory rundown and finish off this review, we will bring in the Ironhide that is actually for sale in the store, which is why he has a price tag on him. So let me straighten them out real quick, and we'll point out a few other things here. So for starters, you're going to notice, there is a pretty big height difference between the two. I will say, despite some similar engineering, they feel about as bulky as each other. Where Ironhide does have this big shield accessory that carries his weight a little bit. He still has this much wider stance than Code Red does. So Code Red comes across as just being tall and lanky, as opposed to Ironhide just being like a big brick of a deluxe in this case. So they're about comparable as far as, engineering, as far as mass goes. Ironhide, I do think, gets a little bit more complexity transformation-wise. I bring him out mostly to demonstrate the fact that the proportions on Code Red are just kind of awkward. The arms actually seem really short for how tall he is, or just the legs are exceedingly long in order to accommodate how the transformation works. So it's a little bit weird. He does have this really unique proportion to him, but it's not unique in a way that really makes him stand out. It more or less just kind of makes me go, oh, that looks a little awkward. So there's that going on. And now we can talk the accessory loadout. So for that, we take the Surfer Boy sign. We can pull the tip out, and then find that little panel that we can flip up. And that's going to create the gun accessory. However, we can also load in his pizza box. The pizza box does not have a 5mm port, which means the character cannot hold the pizza box with his hand, which is upsetting. It loads in the top like you are loading this thing to fire with pepperoni or something. All right, so pepperoni gun armed. He actually, So I like that they actually found an accessory use for it. That's kind of cool. There is also a piece that we haven't shown before, and that is a blast effect. It is not the soft type of blast effect. It's done with the same solid translucent plastic that the rest of the toy uses, so it is nice and firm. However, I wouldn't leave it plugged in for too long because it is clear plastic and it really doesn't like handling the stress for that long. In a similar vein, of course, his other two weapons are also translucent plastic. Now, if you're using these individually, that's fine. Nothing's going to happen to them if he's just holding them in his hand. That said, there is a little bit of modular effects on this. So for starters, there are tabs on the tops of these that will allow the flame effect to come out the top of either of them, which is a little bit funky looking, but if you want a flaming club, this is an option you have. It's a weird one, but it exists. And then while he can hold either one of them, you also have a nice little option here where the two accessory pieces can actually plug into each other's handles, which gives you this kind of weapon. And this isn't even listed in the instructions, even though it seems to be a very intentional feature of being able to combine the two together. Again, you're connecting clear plastic sockets, so I'd recommend not leaving him like this. And also, the handles of the weapons are painted, so be careful as you are inevitably twisting these things into the fists in order to get them to fit. It is quite a tight fit, and you might be rubbing paint off over the long term. So keep that in mind too. So with all that said, honestly, if I had paid the full $45 for this toy, even as a fan of the show, I think I would be disappointed, you know? The transformation does have a neat trick or two, but ultimately is kind of thin and not quite as satisfying. I'm not big on the weird proportions and the dull colors. The accessory loadout definitely helps, but I honestly feel like I'm getting what should be like a tall deluxe with a bunch of parts into it to throw it into Voyager price point, and then upping the price even more because we have both the Volkswagen and Stranger Things license mixed in. There is, of course, the box, which is a very cool novelty, but ultimately I want to know how the toy is, because that's what I value out of the money I'm spending. And for that, honestly, I feel like the toy comes up thin. You know, for all the hype I heard, and oh my god, they actually figured out how to make a van transform now. I'm still seeing flaws in it. So this is my opinion of Code Red. Nice figure, feels overpriced. Feels very overpriced. If you can find it on sale and you're a fan of Stranger Things, go for it, but don't pay the $45. Out of all of the collaboration figures, this is the one where I the most have not felt the added price point as nearly as much as I should.
We parlay with the captain.
You would think a werecroc is going to listen to elvish rules of piracy.
Of course it would be
Got
the
it.
freaking elves
Cool.
that invented parlay.
I had to think of a quick replacement for the French.